Calling the meeting to order, Rush Lake Watershed, Monday, November 26, 2018 at the Nepeuskun Town Hall. We are recording the meeting for simplified minutes and posting online. Present are all directors except for Todd Thalen, who gave me notice he would not be attending, and Gary Page, who may be showing up or may not. Also, three members of the public, Ellen Barth of the DNR, Brad Steinbach of Mayville Insurance are present, also included in the three. So first item, just want to update everyone on the progress on grant applications and timelines. When we left off in October, there were a number of initiatives underway, and I have briefed all of the directors to some extent on those results that we've achieved thus far. But for the benefit of the audience, I'll recap a few select items. One of the items that we pursued was an NRDA grant for cattail control in a pilot program format. We did not receive the NRDA grant. NRDA is interested in the concept of our project, just not this formulation at this time. Reasons for being declined range from the pilot project itself versus broad control, too high a ratio of monitoring and incidental efforts to management effort, long-term sustainability, which would be the risk that money spent doesn't create a lasting impact, and not enough interaction with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Reapplying for a future grant with NRDA is welcomed, and that's important to note. While possible to reapply in February of 2019 for an NRDA grant, we might not do so until the fall cycle of 2019 or later. There are two application deadlines a year, so just because this fall didn't develop, it doesn't mean it's out. And the delay that we have in reapplying, whether we do it next fall or later, allows us to collaborate better with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Wisconsin DNR, and with our combined lake management plan update, it'll better flesh out alternatives on Rush Lake. The second grant that we were looking to pursue was a DNR aquatic invasive species grant. We were not applying for that grant as we originally intended. Our contact with the DNR viewed our aquatic plant management plan that we reviewed at the October meeting as too lacking on specific detail. That detail, in his view, would be more fleshed out with a lake management plan, which is why they expressed strong reservations on applying for an AIS grant prior to embarking on an updated lake management plan, which is the subject of the third grant. Which comes to the silver lining in this process. We have two that we thought we were going for, but we're not going to be receiving at this time. And despite losing that, we're still on track for what we sought out earlier this year. The lake management planning grant and the resulting lake management plan update hold the key for broad-scale effort in the watershed in the coming years. Not receiving an implementation grant from NRDA or the DNR doesn't preclude us from working with another partner on management efforts in the watershed, which may include universities, Ducks Unlimited, and Stantec, just to name a few. It solely sets us back from a funding standpoint. Going forward, there are other grants that we can look at. For instance, the Webster Foundation grant has an 11/30 application deadline. I have a draft on that I'll be sharing with the subcommittee after tonight's meeting. So that's due at the end of the week. But also there's other grants like a C grant, Pittman-Robertson grant, and those are things that we discussed to some degree with one of our contacts at UW Stevens Point. So there's other grants that can help us achieve some of the things that NRDA voiced as concerns, like having too much monitoring, at least more than they wanted to pay for and shoulder on their solely by themselves. So those are other opportunities that may come with other partners that we're working to get in the fold right now. So I guess with that, I'll turn it over to Melissa Curran, who is our project manager from Stantec, to share any additional insights you might have on the grant application process and timelines and so on.
So do you want me to talk about the planning grant, or just the two that we discussed?
Save the planning grant, because that'll be the second part of there's more meat on that, so talk about the other ones first.
Okay, so there's two grants that we have the opportunity to apply. One is a Wisconsin Sea grant, and that's specific to research-focused projects that are within the Great Lakes Basin. And we had a meeting a couple weeks ago now with UW Stevens Point. There's a professor there, Kyle Herman, that seems to be really interested in partnering with us. He has some really great thoughts and ideas on research that he'd like to do. And I think it's hard to find grants that are willing to fund research projects. And he suggested finding an opportunity where we could actually find a grant that would fund a research student to really, a graduate level student to really kind of own this project and develop some really interesting theories and implement some monitoring over the course of 2 to 3 years. So we think Sea Grant is a good opportunity. It is, there's a pre-proposal that's due January 11th, so I'll work with Brett and the grant subcommittee to put together a pre-proposal. And these are kind of two-step process. So the pre-proposal is generally something kind of brief. It's usually a couple pages that you put together. And if they like that, then you put together a full proposal. And so if we make it past if they are interested in the project after January 11th, then we go for full proposal sometime in April, end of April is when that would be due. And the Sea Grant, like I said, is research focused, and they will fund about $100,000 to about $120,000 a year. And these can be 4-year projects. So it would fund a graduate student's tuition. It would fund expenses for that graduate student to come out and do research. We likely wouldn't need $100,000 a year, but I'm sure we could come up with ways to spend $100,000 a year if we needed. Some of the target areas are they're really interested in Green Bay restoration projects. They're interested in contamination, Great Lakes focused. So one of their focus areas is healthy coastal ecosystems, sustaining fisheries, and resilient communities. So I think there's a lot of ways we could frame a project so that it meets their goals and objectives. So that's one. You guys have any questions about that one? Okay. Then the other one is through Fish and Wildlife Service, and this one I actually want to call the local Fish and Wildlife Service staff out of the Green Bay to see if this is a good fit. But this is through their Great Lakes Fish and Wildlife Restoration Act. And just because Fish and Wildlife Service, who administers NRDA, wasn't interested in funding the project right now through NRDA, that doesn't mean this other program would be interested in. So that project, on average, they're about 2-year projects, and on average, the project budgets are around $125,000 a year, so they'll fund a pretty significant amount. And that could fund actual restoration on the ground. I know when we met with Stevens Point, they were really interested in doing a burn. They were really interested in doing a trial drawdown, so that's something I'll have to talk with the permitting agencies about. So there's a lot of different ways we could look at spending that money. So those are the two that we're looking at now. And the Fish and Wildlife Service one is a pre-proposal deadline. Again, that's a multi-step process where you put the pre-proposal in, and then if they like it, they'll ask you to submit a full proposal, and that's early January 7th. So lots more opportunities.
So I had one comment to what you just shared, Melissa. On the interest in doing a trial drawdown, the expectation was not that it would look like the 2006 drawdown, where it would be a lake-wide thing. It would be something that would be much more targeted to do a trial on the northern end of the lake where it's shallower. So it might resemble maybe a drought of 2012, or maybe even not that bad. I don't know, we'd have to figure out what the trial means for that, but it's by no means a game over for any hunter or fisherman on the lake.
Yeah, so I think what Kyle was really thinking is we would maybe, pick an area, I'm not even sure how big he was thinking, maybe the size of this room may be bigger, where we would actually pump the water out, so it would simulate what the lake would look like and how it would respond if it was an actual drawdown. So we would, I think, feel a lot more comfortable about how to manage the water level if we were able to experiment a little bit without actually doing a full drawdown on the lake. That was just his initial thought. Not sure where that'll go yet.
I guess I would question that if we're in I believe, a 4-year of actually raising the water, why are we be toying around with the idea of draining it? It could drain, I don't know how you drain one specific spot because they all build the dikes.
Yeah, and I don't know
which I think would be just out of this almost impossible to do. So I would just question that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more that we need to discuss and think about. initial ideas that you have.
Lease-wise, until we see, what are we in the second year of that 4-year?
Third, next year is the final year of trying to keep it steady at the upper end.
Probably by the time they get around to approving any of this, we might be over the study period.
So that's the high-level update. Does anybody have any questions, comments on any of that at this point? No? Okay. Then with that, we'll move on to reviewing and discussing the lake management planning application. I've provided this to all of the directors, and I've also given a first round of comments to Melissa. There's some typos and other small remarks that I've provided. If anybody has anything, I'd love to help funnel those to Melissa. In short, my view on the plan was it basically included everything except for soil sampling that Stevens Point was looking to propose, and Melissa did her best to update the budget without having an expectation on what the price tag on soil sampling would cost from Point themselves. They did provide kind of a thumb in the wind estimate when we visited with them, but the plan included everything from public outreach, vegetation survey, water sampling, the soil survey, and there was another one in there, wasn't there, Melissa?
Seed bank.
Aquatic invasive survey.
Yeah. I guess the other one I'm thinking of it was kind of combining public involvement and outreach. So I guess with that, Melissa, do you have any? Oh, the handout I provided, one of the two handouts, is an updated budget that goes along with this that ties in with our best view of life as of today without those additional pieces of information from Stevens Point. The total price tag on there of $38,500 is roughly the DNR grant plus our match commitment without any real extra in there. So that's kind of, it's kind of an upper limit, but we could certainly spend more, although it would be on our dime as the DNR match is maxed out. Melissa, do you have any other comments on the proposal as it is right now?
Sure. I do have a few comments. One, the budget. The numbers that I put in these different categories are really approximate. The DNR isn't going to hold us to that number, so if we need to spend more money on, a public survey, and then we'll just have less money available for something else. So they're really just the best guess at this point. So don't get too hung up on how those were all allocated. And this for $25,000, we're really not proposing to have a final plan written at the end of the year or two, however long it takes us. But I will say we are going to write sections of the plan. So when we do a public survey, there'll be an analysis, there'll be a memo written that'll then either, that information will be incorporated into the plan, or maybe it'll just be an attachment. We are proposing to do an aquatic invasive species survey, so there will be a report that comes of that. From that will then also, the data will be incorporated into a plan. So even though we're not, having a final plan at the end of this, we're definitely going to have sections of it written, which will help. And then for successfully getting some of these other grants, maybe we can incorporate some drafting of the plan within those other scopes so that we don't have to wait for another DNR cycle to be able to finish the plan. That's my goal. Ultimately, we all want to get to the plan as soon as possible. I don't think I had any other comments.
So why is Point looking to soil sample? What's the idea of that?
They discussed having a better sense of what the seed bank looks like, and because there was, Brett, remind me, was it early 2000s when they did the last seed bank study?
1993.
93, okay, so before we had all that cattail. So understanding if, the seed bank has changed, and also getting a sense of how thick that layer of cattail root mass is, if that's going to impact, germination. If there's a foot of that's sitting on top of the native muck soil, how would that impact our restoration efforts and trying to get natives to establish.
So are you checking phosphorus and all that in soil?
I don't think, remind me, Brett, I don't think that cost that he was throwing out included any sort of analysis, or maybe some of the really cheap ones they could.
There were two kinds that Kyle talked about with us. There was a less expensive one, and there was a more expensive one. The less expensive one, I want to say it was more of a take out a few centimeters, take the cores and you take out a few centimeters and then see what's in there. So I'm not sure that there was much from a chemical sampling standpoint in what we have. If there's a benefit to it and there's a way to fund it, then those are all things that we could work in. I don't know that we need to decide any of that tonight, like whether you go for flavor A of soil or flavor B. I think that's where, and correct me if anybody has a differing opinion, that's where when this becomes live, we should probably have a steering committee for the lake management plan, so it's not like we have to hold a general meeting every 2 weeks or something to keep it moving, right? And that's where Brian Glodzinski of DU said he'd be interested to be a partner on that, and Stantec would be on that if we have some public volunteers, university, and then we build a team out kind of like the subcommittees from back when.
And I don't have the scope yet from Point, so maybe you'll include some of that.
Kyle was very in tune with the nutrient question, Kevin. One of the unique things about the conversation that we had was we were doing some trial on the Little Plover River with some ways to filter out phosphorus in the Little Plover River. And it was the kind of thing where it was kind of a unique technique that he's kind of inventing. And if it's one of these things where we do a trial on one of our tributaries into the lake and it gives him a little more data and it can maybe help us out here, all the better. So he brought a very unique can-do perspective to it, and he did have an eye towards the nutrients, so there might be something contemplated.
So is that going to tell us if a lot of the nutrients are coming from the decaying of the plants? Because Ted Johnson was concerned about the influx of nutrients coming in from other streams.
Yeah. I don't know what to say to that. TBD. Figure it out when we get there how it gets developed. Because when we did the 300-page binder, there's the WILMS model that figures out how much phosphorus is in there based on all their algorithms and whatnot. So how it all fits together, I'm not sure what to say at this moment without being further down the road.
Yeah, we're not going to do any modeling under this current proposal, so if they can model how much phosphorus is coming just from recycling within the lake, so we'll probably know that in a later phase. And I think the modeling would be a great thing to do to include within the C grant, so that's one less thing that we would need to pay for with DNR funds.
What I like about the approach is when we spoke with Ted Johnson a few months back, he talked about developing the plan, but not just developing the plan, saying the plan's done, but coming back to it and updating it with other pieces of information as we go. So if we have other grant sources and we can do a deeper dive on phosphorus cycling or whatever, it all adds to the plan and it just helps make it better over time. So I like that we don't just try and say, we're going to go for a $50,000 DNR grant on day one and just do everything and have it done, because it's not going to be done. It's something that's a work in progress and we continue to improve over time. And that was one of the questions that Ted Johnson posed to us. Do we go for a $25,000 grant now and then another one next year? Do we go for a full 50 now and go for more? And it was, to me, it felt kind of like walk before you run. Start inching into it. We get a partner on board or partners on board from a university standpoint, and we start to walk down the road and, it snowballs. So Any other questions or comments on the plan or the lake management planning scope that's in here? You know, the old plan, we've had lots of, I wouldn't say lots of, but a fair amount of dialogue about, you know, the Native Americans and the glaciers and all sorts of information that's pertinent to the history of Rush Lake, but doesn't necessarily impact what's happening out there now. And I think this one, it does a good job leveraging things like that were previously documented. And then we stick to the high notes: public outreach, education, water, soil, vegetation, and then we build off from there.
Related to this, but have you noticed Rush Lake any place where previous spraying has any of the rushes returned at all? That kind of grew in at all? Just thinking because my base family's, their land runs the whole entire length of the east end of the U-Line Reserve there. And this year out there deer hunting, there's a lot of rush-like plants there that haven't been there before. So it seems like years back that was cattails beyond cattails, but now we've been cutting that for a number of years. And it was basically canary grass, but there's a lot, what appears to be a rush type, whether it's your bulrush or something similar. There's a tremendous amount on that whole west end. So I just wonder if because everything was, we were underwater, and it still is underwater pretty much. And it was enough where the ice is green from, I presume there's some kind of algae grew there all late summer. But apparently this has flourished and whatever situation. So I just wonder if maybe you noticed anything similar to that.
I haven't. Anybody?
Could that be a sedge, perchance?
This is possible.
No, them are, we got some bios growing. Certain years you'll have it growing even on high ground.
So what is it?
Bulrush.
Okay.
Don't know what kind, but it comes certain years, certain years it doesn't.
Not cattails.
No.
No, it's not, definitely not cattails.
Just takes the right conditions for it to grow.
But it is well established. Well established.
Is that up next to one of their cells?
Yes, the whole along either east boundary there.
Yeah. So it's in the cell itself, or
No, it's on our,
on yours? Sir.
it's before it's there's 440s there in a row, and it's well out halfway, but spotty, but it's thick right along the west shore there of 150 yards, and then it's very dark brown at this time, and quite thick. Varies how with the width, but I just was wondering if that would, just because there it has been substantially wet, so it wouldn't be a whole lot different than some areas too in Rush Lake, I would think. It was been thriving there this last year, maybe two.
When it's cut, Chuck, is this what's cut harvested off then?
It would be if we could get to it, but we've cut others, but not that yet.
But in the years past,
Yes.
when it's cut, it's harvested.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I got a question that popped up. Does burning destroy bulrushes? I mean, we're bringing down the vegetation, and in our bulrushes they have to breathe through the winter. Is that something that we can categorically say don't worry about, or is it a concern?
I'm not sure how deep they are compared to cattail. I know what Kyle was saying, we need to burn, have it burn pretty good, pretty low, and then in order to have the cattail. I'm not Sure.
I was going to say, we don't want to defeat, you know.
Sure.
I have at least one study that compares the impact of burning on cattail and bulrush against not burning, and one of the takeaways from it is that the bulrush grows back with a higher protein content than it does the year before, and it becomes a better food source, and because it becomes a better food source, it's eaten more readily by muskrats and other animals. So you get more of it, but you also lose more of it because it's available, at least in the one study. So the takeaway from that I had was it helps it, but it's a blessing and a curse.
Sets it up for
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Yeah, and I like the way you always described it, that it's the candy for the ducks, but it's the candy for the muskrats too. So, and like that one, nobody's itching to burn today or anything, so those will all be things to address in subcommittee, steering committee down the road, and make sure a thoughtful plan is being put forward.
In your travels out there, I didn't get a chance to go on Rush Lake this fall. What about the muskrat population? Does it look like it's the same, less, more? Or too early to tell?
I don't know. I was out on, last time I was out was opening day and the day I pulled my boat, so a week ago, so 2 weeks ago. So I don't know what it looked like in the middle of fall there. Before then, everything was still pretty green, so I couldn't really tell. I don't know, Bob, were you out, or Seth? Art, you were out on the north end.
Yeah, but just through that channel. I mean, I saw a few feed beds and that sort of stuff, but not that much. There didn't seem like there was much trapping effort or anything like that. Of course, the fur prices are down quite a bit.
I haven't really seen many rats swimming around either this year. You know, a lot of times you'll just be out there on your boat or you'll be fishing or whatever and you'll see rats swimming here and there, and I haven't really seen too many of them this year. So I don't know that means the population's down, you know. The water's deeper, so maybe they don't, I don't know. I haven't seen as many as I normally do.
I think that this study should definitely include making surveys and recording on muskrats, especially seeing we have the aerial photos from 2011 or there, and work from that, and the people that are familiar with Rush Lake would certainly like to know what plans we have or what benefit the muskrat would have for the future plans of Rush Lake.
That's a good comment. Melissa, what are your thoughts on including a muskrat survey, or how would you include a muskrat survey in the...
I'm not even sure how you would do a muskrat survey, so I would have to talk to our wildlife biologist to get a sense, but I'm definitely open to that. Get a sense of cost and how much.
We had pictures taken by the DNR, I guess in 2011, I didn't remember when it was.
That one's on.
But it was very clear what they were, the population. You could literally, I think, count the rat houses from that photograph. That's a good idea if you took another one and compared it now.
When is the best time to get the pictures of the muskrat houses so you can see them?
When it really showed up, if I remember right,
Snow.
is when you had snow.
Yeah.
Not a lot of snow.
They look like freckles then.
Measles.
Yeah.
So maybe it's as simple as just getting some imagery, which you can do, right? Snap your finger.
Yeah, you keep talking. You run in front of it.
I would think the public would be interested in a hard count. You know, say, well, this year they surveyed and there was 40,000 rat houses, or we're down 20,000. I mean, it's visual, it's lead-in, and I think it's important to the health of the lake. I mean, to me, it's let's adopt a muskrat personally, but I think that it would be, as far as outreach to the public, and well, and of course the trappers are going to know where to come in, but it just strikes me as something that a person can quickly relate to. Is, oh, we gained 1% more bulrushes than we did last year, and there's nothing to grasp there for people. So I think he had a great idea there as far as getting a hard count, which we could do. I mean, you get a satellite image, and I'd count them.
You don't even need a satellite image. Me and I have taken some really good pictures, and it really showed it.
If I had the material, I'd count it. I've done that in the lab an awful lot. So anyway, but I'm retired though too. I think that would be a lovely thing to pay public.
I think securing some good aerial imagery probably is a good idea for a number of reasons, so that's something I think we could try and work into the cost, depending on how the numbers shake out.
Yeah, with the flyover photography, I could see there being some challenges because it's pretty close, but it's not uniform. There's angles and things like that. So like satellite would be more uniform, but like how readily available that is at that kind of resolution, I guess we don't know. But I had that contact at Digital Globe who Steve Lentz used at Horicon with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, so they might be able to help support that. To Bob, to your comment, I think it's a really good one because grazing is a common management technique of cattail. And some places they do it with cattle where they have a bottom that you can count on. And other places like ours, muskrat are a huge part of it. And I think, if we go back and look at the 4-year water level trial, it was in large part due to the drought we had in 12, how the muskrat population suffered the year after with freezing out, and trying to keep enough water out there on the lake to get them back in places that they used to be. So I think having that quantified is very important to the long-term health of the lake.
Ron,
I'd support it.
water level?
Right now?
Yeah.
Oh, 1.45.
So that's close to where the target was. 1.4 was the target.
Yeah.
Melissa, can you, I don't know how we do this, if we vote on it or what, but I think there's general agreement that we'd like to see that in the plan getting started. Yeah?
Aerial imagery or some sort of
Muskrat survey, something that we can build off of, and if we need aerial to do that, or if you can fly your drone for an hour, and if you do it by a sample, or if you have to do the whole lake, I don't know, something that provides some sort of meaningful outcome instead of like an anecdotal, well, this airplane went over on this day and it looked like this compared to that. Because anecdotes are nice, but if we can't count on them for other science and...
Can you say, they may, by using accurate, say, yearly surveys, I think you could also prove if there would be an improvement of open water in areas that were not sprayed or treated by us. It's not us and them, the muskrats and us, but what I'm saying is it'd be interesting to see if there's any evidence we can draw some conclusions from. Strongly support the natural grazing.
It's the natural way of looking at it compared to what it used to be. That was one of the things that had an effect on the lake, and that's rather than just talking burning and chemicals and so forth, we certainly should add the muskrat.
Should we vote on it?
I second Bob's motion.
All right. Motion made to include a muskrat survey in the lake management plan scope. Seconded by
Second.
Bruce. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. Melissa, please connect with your people to get that included. Any other? Thank you, Bob. Any other questions or comments, observations with the lake management planning grant application or scope?
We had till the 10th of December, that's going to be taken care of.
Yep, it has to be submitted by December 10th.
We spoke to Ted Johnson a few weeks back Doug. He said if we provide him the plan here early this week, he'd be able to review and get it back to us. I think early next week. I think he said like the 4th of December, 3rd, 4th, or 5th, somewhere in there. So either way, we'd give him a first pass, and here's what it looks like. He'd sniff around on it and see if there's opportunities for us to improve it, and then we'd have another chance to revise and then submit by December 10th. So if, I don't know if, Melissa, do you have a view if this is ready enough to send to Ted to look at with a couple caveats that we're waiting on soil and muskrat scopes?
I haven't included your comments that you provided a couple week and a half ago or so, but once I do that, I think, we'll have, I'm not going to, by tomorrow, be able to get the muskrat information in there. So there'll be a few things I need to change. But I think it's enough, it's good enough for him to take a look at now.
Okay. Anybody have any objection to writing that over to Ted to take a peek at? No? Okay. Any other questions or remarks on the application or scope right now?
Don't run away, I got a couple little points here, but.
Okay. Well, if nothing further, there's one administrative piece that comes along with the grant application. It's an item that I provided you. I highlighted mine up with the blanks. This is a standard authorizing resolution from the DNR, which basically we would need to have on file with the DNR that says who from our organization can sign and submit a grant application, who can enter into the grant agreement, who can submit the quarterly or final reports, reimbursement requests, and submit other documents. If we don't have one of these on file and we apply, they'll say we don't have an authorized representative on file, we don't accept your application, and it goes in the trash heap. So to get this across the finish line with them, I took the liberty to draft this resolution. So the thing that I provided each of you guys in physical form a week and a half ago in your mailboxes, I handed a different handout, which is the same exact thing typed, except I added our name, Rush Lake Watershed Restoration, Inc. Applying for a grant for the purpose of preparing a large-scale lake management plan, which is right off of Melissa's drafted application at the top of page 1. I added myself as the authorized representative, just being the president being the guy who signs off and pulls the trigger on these items with the DNR. Whoever would be the president at the time would have that responsibility, and adopted as of the day of this meeting. So I make a resolution to pass this resolution that I've handed out to each of you. If you'd please read it, and then we'll have debate or discussion on the document.
Brett, what would we call this resolution? Authorizing something or other?
Yeah, just a DNR grant authorizing resolution.
I'll make a motion to approve the DNR grant authorizing resolution provided.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the DNR grant authorizing resolution as written and seconded. Any further discussion on the resolution? No? Okay. All in favor of approving the...
Should you take a roll call vote on that, maybe?
Sure. Let's take a roll call vote. Okay. Bruce?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Art?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Seth?
Aye.
Ron?
Aye.
Brett? Aye. Kevin?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
ayes have it, all in favor, none were opposed. Seth, if you'd please sign this, and then I will get a scan of it and off to the DNR. If nothing further, the approach here is Melissa is going to jot down the couple edits for the typos and stuff. She'll send it off to Ted. We'll be working with him on that. When Ted comes back with comments, and after we have additional feedback on the muskrat survey, I think it'd be smart to have a grant subcommittee quick meeting, like I'll circulate it, and even if we just talk on the phone or something, just to make sure we're all nodding our heads on it. So I'll be in touch on that. As far as the Webster Foundation grant, what I'll do is send that to you guys after tonight's meeting, Doug, Art, and Seth. And if you guys would take that a peek, if you could give that a peek tomorrow or Wednesday morning, I'd love to have that down to Webster's on Wednesday afternoon. And I'll provide a little extra context on it. It's a very short grant application. It's basically 3 questions, describe your project and how it fits into the community. So it's pretty straightforward. So I'll circulate that after. If nothing else on grants, we can move on to administrative considerations. Any other grant discussion at this time? No? Okay. So we have 2 special guests tonight. One of them is Brad Steinbach. He is the owner of Mayville Insurance Agency. I asked Brad to come and speak tonight because he is a gentleman whose roots go very deep on the lake. He owns property on the east side of the lake. I think it'd be fair to say you've been hunting here since you were a kid. And understands the lake pre-restoration, post-restoration, and he also happens to be a good friend of my family. And when my dad's up hunting, I go over and tell Brad what we have going on here at Rush Lake Watershed. So he knows some of the initiatives that we have going, which gives him a unique insight as to what we might be trying to work on out here and things that might potentially benefit from having some insurance coverage, as we do not have any corporate insurance. Brad, before giving you the floor, I just want to take a moment to put a real fine point on some of the things we've been speaking about with universities. So when we go out and talk to universities, they talk about having a graduate student doing work. They're in the lake, they're getting muddy, and those are the kind of people that they'd be getting paid a stipend, their tuition would be getting paid. Maybe it would be getting paid from Rush Lake Watershed, and we'd have to figure out how to do a payroll, which wouldn't be a problem because I'm a CPA and I could do a one-man payroll real quick. Or maybe the university pays it. Don't know. We're going to have contractors. Stantec might go out and do something, but we might be working with Ducks Unlimited or other organizations too. We might be having volunteers who are out there helping collect samples, who show up and say, hey, I'm here to help Rush Lake Watershed. What can I do? And 2, we might have things where guys like me or other directors are out giving people tours of the lake in our own personal boats, and but we're doing it on behalf of the organization. So with that, I guess I'll just open it up to you and help illuminate us on some of the risks that might be.
You have a lot of potential risks when you talk about those different things. First, my handout. Let's go through this, what I've quoted up on this here, and give you an idea, because these are kind of minimum premiums, in other words, based on the information I was given where you're at right now. And the company that I use, which is NSI out of Madison, is a division of West Bend Mutual, and this is what they specialize in, is nonprofit organizations and insuring them for liability, and also providing coverage for the directors and officers running those organizations, okay? And you can see the general liability premium for the year is $419. The directors and officers premium is $450 a year. So it isn't big dollars by any means, okay? But it does protect you. And it's just like if you sit on a church board, your church policy has directors and officers liability for your actions on that board running the church, okay? The same thing works for the organization here. Decisions you make and do may affect people. It may affect people because they may get hurt in some way, okay? And if they sue you as an individual or as an organization, you're going to need an attorney. And who's going to pay for that attorney? It's going to be the insurance company that has the policy for you. Now, one of the things I put on the front thing here is if you do hire people, contractors or subcontractors, make sure you get a certificate of insurance from those people that if they're doing projects for you. And make sure you get named as an organization, as an additional insurer. This is something we do every day with contractors. It's common practice, okay? You hire somebody, I want proof that you have insurance to pay me if you harm me in some way, bodily injury or property damage. So this isn't unusual request. You're a contractor, you have that request offered, correct? Yep. No problem doing that. But highly recommend, even if you don't have an insurance policy, you should be doing that anyway. So let's go to the next page. This is where the actual premium is. We're going to flip all the way through until you get to that liability limits page. You're going to see where it starts out with a general aggregate of $2 million. Everybody find that? Where is it? So for the year, that's the most we'd ever pay for all claims that you may have. The occurrence limit, which is the third one down, is $1 million. So if the organization or the individuals get sued for the actions of the organization, because you're considered an additional insured as individuals, they'll pay up to $1 million, okay, for a bodily injury claim or a property damage claim. Products would come into play. You have fundraisers, you're going to serve food, you're going to serve something. That would be a product that you have. That would be a liability claim that you could have. You have brat fry.
Yep.
Okay, people get sick from the brat fry, you could get sued from that. Claims for organization like yours, it isn't common. It isn't, but if it does happen, you're sure going to want this protection for you as an individual. We will not provide medical payment coverage on this policy. So this is not an accident policy or a disability policy, okay? So volunteers, when you go out and you volunteer to do something for this organization, it's like you going out in your own woods cutting wood for yourself. Okay, you hurt yourself with doing this, you have your own insurance. You have your own health insurance, you got your own disability insurance, you got your own life insurance. This is not an accident policy for volunteers doing something for the organization. You are volunteering your time and your effort. If you hurt yourself during that, it isn't like you're an employee for somebody who has workers' comp. Now, when you were talking about the fact that you may have these people that come and do something for you, you would want to make them an employee, because if they're not being paid, you're not going to have any coverage for them if they get hurt doing tests or going out there, okay? So, again, you would like to maybe see the university cover them, because they're kind of students of the, but I don't know if they're going to make them an employee, and provide them some kind of work comp for that. So that's going to be a difficult situation when you get into those people coming out. They're doing it for their studies, correct? Right. In regards to you taking your boat out and giving people rides, that's your boat. That's your homeowners, your boat insurance. You're doing that as, okay? Now, if the organization gets sued, okay, besides you, the operator of the boat, there'd be coverage under this policy for that, okay? Let's see here. The way it's charged is, this policy is based on the number of members, number of special events, and any type of activities you do. And this is kind of you don't know exactly what you're all doing yet. It's going to be coming down the pipe. And we will work on that as we go forward. Now with directors and officers, what I'm going to do is go right to that last page and kind of explain how that works. You sit on this board, you make decisions, it may affect people, the decisions you make or an error that you make, and it may not be something where you harm them physically or that you cause bodily injury, but they may be affected by your decision on what you might do with the lake, okay? So basically, director's office is going to cover any act or alleged act, error, omission, misstatement, misleading statement, breach of duty by a director, officer, or a trustee in your capacity. And somebody is harmed, and it could be another director bringing an action against this organization for something that you do. Sometimes there's infighting amongst directors and stuff. What do you do if you have a situation where a lawsuit's brought against you from another person? So that's what this does. It protects you if you're named in a lawsuit as a director of this organization. Doesn't happen often, but if it does happen, there's an exception. Now, I guess if you got specific questions, I'd answer those for you. You talked about that university person. We talked about you giving, anytime you do something on your own, it's like driving your car. If you give somebody a ride in your car, the primary insurance always goes with the car and who owns that car. Okay? Same thing with a boat. Okay? Unless the boat is actually owned by the organization, then we'd have to actually insure that boat specifically. So.
Okay. For what it's worth, when we started the grant application process, Ellen provided me a number of binders that had some legacy information in it, and a number of the items were old minutes from the steering committee before we were Rush Lake Watershed Restoration, Inc. And in a few sets of the minutes, there was discussion about us potentially looking to procure insurance at some point, but the minutes never got into it any further than that. So my only comment is, at least once upon a time back before September of 2002 when we incorporated, there was some thought that we might pursue insurance. What happened to it back when and the idea, I don't know. But for me, if we're talking about contracting a party and they're going out on the lake and maybe doing a burn or some other control or whatever, I care about Rush Lake and I care about making the lake better. But personally, I carry insurance and everything, but I don't personally really like the idea of being personally exposed because of the actions of the organization. We try our best and we're looking to make things be better, but bad things do happen sometimes. So in my view, even just doing the brat fry, it's like, it's a thing that you think we make some money on, but if something bad happens and we get sued and then, our whole treasury could get lost to lawyer bills and then we got nothing from the brat fry and we got zero in the treasury and a lawsuit hanging over our head. So, I don't know. I'll just open up to there. Any questions or comments from any directors?
Well, initially, I thought the thought was that if we did get sued, that there wasn't all that much money in the treasury, whether it was $8,000 or 10 or 20, that we just file bankruptcy and just let it go. What is your opinion on that?
Well, if it's a serious enough claim, they're going to go after the individuals. You can file bankruptcy on the corporation, right?
Right.
Then you'd have to start it again.
That's an attorney question, but I think they will keep going after anybody they can with deep pockets.
Okay, so
individually, let's say you get named individually in the lawsuit besides the corporation. Okay? You personally. Now, you may get coverage on your homeowners. You may not get coverage on your homeowners. They may say, no, this isn't covered under here. Now you got to hire an attorney to fight your homeowners company that might not pay that claim. Wouldn't you rather have, if you get named in a lawsuit, you get protection under a policy at least to $1 million? Because the organization can file bankruptcy, but that doesn't mean they can't stop suing the people of the organization.
So why couldn't a person, instead of going with both of those policies, what about just the just the directors and officers liability? The general
See, the difference between the two policies is one is protecting you against a bodily injury to somebody where somebody physically got hurt or you caused property damage to somebody's property. The directors and officers is more of an error or a mistake or something that you did to cause them harm in a different way. That's the difference between the directors and officers.
I understand that, but the point is the general liability would be the accident, somebody got hurt, whatever
right.
got there. And if you just file bankruptcy, whatever's in the treasury, $8,000, you'd lose that.
Yeah, but are you personally going to file bankruptcy?
No, okay, I'm just saying, okay, that is that. Now, the directors and officers liability, that I could understand, where someone could say, okay, you did something and we're getting sued for it. So, am I correct in saying is the general liability would be our treasury, dash, and then the personal liability, the directors and officers liability, that I could see then maybe it would have some merit in having that.
Well, I guess what you're saying, why would you file, you would file bankruptcy on a general liability claim? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that if we were sued,
You get sued.
as a general liability,
Right.
okay, somebody got hurt, whatever, out there, that general liability would take care of that.
Yes.
Second out would be is if you decided not to have that insurance, then if it happened,
You go to the directors and officers for failing to buy the general liability?
but that's what I'm saying. Why do I need them both?
Uh-huh.
That's my question. I could definitely see the directors liability. The other one would be,
Well, I don't think the directors and officers are going to pay that product liability claim for the product line.
so we'd come back on our treasury,
Mm-hmm.
which the limit would be $8,000 or whatever we have in the treasury right now.
No, that's not totally true, because if we have grant awards, a lawsuit could say, and we want that grant money too. And if our go-to move is if we have grants in the works and awarded, if our go-to move is we'll just declare bankruptcy and fold, that sounds like I don't know how these grant parties look at, but I'm guessing it would look like a pretty lousy grant partner. That's just my guess.
But at the broad fry, they'd be suing Webster beside you.
Maybe.
Because it's held at their place.
And you're buying the product out of their store.
Correct.
Pardon?
At the broad fry, they're doing it at a grocery store.
Yeah.
So the lawsuit would be against the grocery store besides you.
They could be included in the suit as well. Yes. It would name everybody, and you as a sponsor would be named in it,
Right.
okay?
Right.
But whoever provided you the brat, but who cooked the brats? Were you guys volunteering and cooking them yourselves? So, I mean, everybody who's involved in it is going to possibly be named if it's a serious enough liability claim. So, I guess you got to decide if you think you have an exposure or not. And that's up to you to decide if you think it's worth having that or not. And I guess what I would say to do is kick it around here, talk amongst yourselves, and you can get back to me and see if you want to do this. And you can do this in the future. You don't have to do it right away. Wait till you start having more projects. It's really... But all I know is I would not sit on any nonprofit board of directors without a general liability and a directors and officers policy to protect me personally, okay? Because I just got too much to lose to do that. Because it's a litigious society, and you can have all the different scenarios, and I can't answer all those legal scenarios that you would pose, but for this, I think you should be able to put that into your budget to protect yourselves.
That's what I was going to bring up, our budget. In the last 5 years, have we added enough annually to our budget to even pay this premium?
Well, the rock Friday, I think we always showed $500-600, I guess, somewhere's in there.
Okay, so we have so if we don't have the Brock Fry, we limit our liability, and we don't have, we're not in a budget here that to ensure that for even the $800-900 a year out of our budget is a significant portion of what our fundraising efforts have been in the past. I have no knowledge of what fundraising is going to take in the future, but are we going to spend all of our fundraising efforts to ensure our organization, ourselves from liability? We might as well just not do anything and call it a wash.
I'm looking at it as because of these grants and things and the potential, they've got deep pockets, there's always a way to get into them for people. And we're an organization that cash flow wise and amounts of money that we're going to be working with in the near future, we're stepping up to a different level of operation here. And what he's saying is that don't leave home without it. That's what I say too, and for the idea of some coverage. This looks like a good policy in my mind, and it's well thought. You know, I mean, the guy that he's on the lake. I trust the guy on the lake.
Well, I never trusted an insurance salesman in my life, so I started with that.
That's why I said on the lake.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The thing is though too is, it's not just a matter of selling $500 worth of brats. Is part of what we're doing when we do the brat fry is you're doing community outreach too, as far as publicity and all the rest of that, which is part of the grant, the in-kind that we keep saying we're going to be doing these outreaches to the public. You know, if you're not going to have that, then you're short X number of dollars on outreach. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that's part of it too. That's a hidden benefit, I guess, would be the thing that I'd be saying.
And then as far as coverage goes, just a question. I have no answer to this question as a question. As we all are representatives of a township, and as a representative of the township, does our township carry coverage for our actions as a township representative?
That would be a good thing. Another question for the towns. I never thought of that.
Is this a sanctioned organization of the township?
We all represent everyone here.
But I mean, is this activity part of the township's duties? Are you sanctioned by the township?
We're getting paid.
Huh?
We're getting paid.
No, to be here?
What?
Yes. What? To be at this meeting?
News to you, I'm Bruce.
We're getting paid just as many.
Wake up!
Well, you're covered for this meeting, then. But the activity that would happen at a brat fry or anything else wouldn't be part of the township necessarily.
We're speaking all in hypotheticals.
Yeah, I know you are.
I'm all around. If we get sued,
if you think the township is going to provide liability for you,
the likelihood of us, the organization being sued is very slim to start with.
There's some truth to that.
Well, but you remember this when this whole thing got, Kuchenreuter was threatening it when this whole thing got started, and then that actually was something that kind of was a fly in the ointment until and people were pretty happy when he finally got to the point where he didn't want to do it anymore, if you remember that.
I have a liability question because when you talk about burning cattails, it's not very majority approved. And the question comes up with 3,066 acres. You get a good fire going with the wind blowing. Are you liable from lawsuits from the adjoining cities? Ripon, Pickett, Fisk, Oshkosh, depending.
What, due to the smoke?
Yes.
That's a pollutant, I would think.
Pollution, smoke and ash.
Yeah.
Now, I got one other, just point your hand. If we were to have that fire, whose property are we burning and who's going to be in control of the fire? We can support the idea of the fire.
Yeah.
It's going to be Fish and Wildlife or DNR agents that are conducting the fire, and the fire is going to be on the DNR's property. So I just don't see where I'm gonna vote no on any level of this insurance if you haven't figured that out. And what the rest you do is up to you. But
that's the other thing was, as you mentioned, who's actually responsible for the flames and for lighting it and the weather.
All I'm saying is you sponsored it, you organized it, you hired somebody, whoever did it, did they do it on a too windy of a day, did they do it incorrectly? They're going to sue everybody who was involved in the action. This organization will probably be named in the suit too. So you're going to want to get an attorney to get you out of the suit because you're not the ones who actually did it. Now you're going to have to pay for the attorney to get, a summary judgment against the other side so that you could be removed from the lawsuit. it's just a matter of if you really want to have that protection or not. So it's...
Anything we do out there can affect people's property value that own property on the lake too. That's what I worry about, because if you affect somebody's property value in a negative way, anybody who agreed to do whatever we did, you can be on the hook for that property value. I guess that's what I worry about.
Well, you guys can discuss it, talk about it, and get back to me. I mean, it's...
Brad,
You
how
don't
many,
have to make this decision tonight.
No, not tonight.
Brad, how many of these policies do you have out to organizations similar to?
I would
So
say
somewhat
I
similar to
have,
ours.
I probably have 10 to 12 different hunt clubs, and I've got probably 5 or 6 nonprofits. I insure 2 municipalities, 2 school districts. They all have this type of, coverage. So,
Have you had any claims
have
over
I
the
had
years?
claims?
Yeah.
Definitely with the school districts and municipalities, more so than with the nonprofits. And churches carry this thing too.
John Blazel, would you be willing to comment at all? Maybe, John, just on what you see organizations similar to ours doing for insurance like this?
Yeah, I guess one thing I would comment on is sometimes you may not be liable for something, and you may ultimately win if you're brought into a lawsuit. But one of the benefits to insurance like this is it may provide you with the money to defend yourself. And so, as he was pointing out, you may be able to get out of the suit, but that's going to cost you something. And if the insurance provides these defense costs, which I'm assuming you're talking they would do, you might be able to get out of it without going into your treasury or without having to, zero out your bank account. And that can be beneficial too, so you can keep going on and doing your business. So there's a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of legal issues here, a lot of insurance issues here. But that is one thing that does make a little bit of sense, because I tend to agree. You haven't gotten sued yet, doesn't mean you won't. Or like, is your home going to burn down? It hasn't burned down yet, probably won't. But these kind of things can happen. They can be kind of catastrophic, or if not catastrophic, just really painful. You get out of a lawsuit, but it costs you $10,000, $12,000 to win. Well, there goes your treasury. So I don't have a dog in this fight in terms of the insurance. I don't even know this gentleman, but there is, from a legal perspective, there is some benefit to that. If you have another question, I can field for you, but that was just one of the things that popped in my mind as I was listening to you all talk about it.
Plus, on top of that, is if you stiff your attorney that's worked to get you out of the lawsuit, that probably doesn't go real good.
Your attorney's not very happy, right?
He'll take it to small claims court and he will win.
So John, how many of these cases have you had a case like this?
Have I?
Yeah.
No, I've not specifically handled any litigation involving a nonprofit group. But I don't know that my experience would be representative of what you might see around the state. So just in the practice I have, I have not, but too small of a sample size probably.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions for Brad on either of the two policy types that we talked about tonight? Otherwise, we'll move on to John and talking about bylaws.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Brad.
Are we going to set any type of a time or date to debate this further?
Let's
How are you
just
going to handle that?
let's just save that for the last thing, scheduling the next meeting and adjournment,
Okay.
because that's there's a lot of different ways you could argue that, so we'll
It's fine.
come back to it. All right, John.
All right.
Thank you.
My name is John Blazel, for those of you who I don't know, who we've not met. Brett had asked me to come and talk a little bit about some of the corporate formalities and the importance of following your bylaws in particular. Now, the bylaws are the rules that you have that set forth how you're going to operate and manage the corporation and tend to, internal governance affairs and things of that nature. And it's important to follow your bylaws. And one of the main reasons ties right into some of the things that the insurance gentleman was talking about, and that's liability. By not following your bylaws, you can open yourself up to liability in a number of ways. Now, first of all, you're a corporation. So corporations provide liability protection for the directors. If it was a stock corporation, for the stockholders. And the folks who are running the corporation. And that's pretty good protection. It works a lot of the time, but it's not an absolutely perfect protection. There are circumstances where if the corporation is sued, the directors, you folks, might be held liable for the debts of the corporation. There's a doctrine under the law called piercing the corporate veil. If any of you have heard that, you may not have. It's probably just stuff that lawyers talk about. But in certain circumstances where a corporation does something that a court might find to be fraudulent or just really inherently unfair, there are circumstances under which the court could say, all right, not only the corporation's liable here, but the directors behind it who engaged in the course of conduct may also be liable. It doesn't happen a lot. But one of the things that the court looks at to try and determine whether the corporation is acting fairly and in good faith is, does the corporation follow the corporate formalities? Does it follow its bylaws? Does it keep records? Does it keep minutes? Does it do those things that corporations are supposed to do? And that's one of the factors, among several others, as to whether or not a court is going to say, hey, the directors are liable as well. So that's one reason to pay attention to corporate formalities and to follow whatever it is that you have written into your bylaws. Another reason to follow your bylaws is if you do something contrary to your bylaws or take some type of action that's not authorized or do it in a manner that's not authorized, that can affect the validity of what it is you're doing. So, for example, let's say you want to enter into a contract with somebody to have them do something on behalf of the corporation, but you don't do it according to your bylaws, you don't hold the right meetings, give the right notice, follow the voting procedure or something like that. That may mean that one of the other directors, if you had a group that had some dissent within it, and I know the gentleman here talked about sometimes you have a director bring up an issue or sue somebody. One of the other directors, or maybe one of the members that you may have in the corporation, or even a third party might say, hey, that contract that you entered into, that's not a valid action. You didn't have authority to do that by your own rules. And that could, by a court, be overturned, which might put you in a bind for living up to that contract that you signed with somebody, because now you don't have the authority to enter into it. The contractor is going to be upset with you and may take some action against you, and it can create a headache for you that way. And so another reason for following your bylaws is, and this ties kind of directly into that D&O or directors and officers policy that he was talking about, is as directors, there's like the 3 Ds you may have heard of, the 3 duties that you have to the corporation. You've got a duty of loyalty to the corporation, which refers to conflicts of interest, your interest versus the interest of the corporation. You've got a duty of obedience to the corporation. That is, it's incumbent upon you to act in the corporation's interest to fulfill the purpose of the corporation and its goals. And part of that is following the rules, the bylaws of the corporation in order to comply with your duty of obedience. And then there's a duty of care. You have to follow this reasonable person standard. So when you do things, when you make decisions, you have to use the care that a reasonable person would use when making these types of decisions in similar circumstances. Often goes to your duty to investigate, know what you're voting on, know what you're talking about, reports you're relying on, can we trust those? But that also then ties into making sure you're following your corporate rules, your bylaws, when you take some actions so that you don't maybe do something that somebody could claim was invalid. And so if you follow those duties that you have, that helps to insulate you from somebody suing you. But if you're not following those duties, and a piece of that is your bylaws, if you're not doing that, then that makes it more likely that a court would say, yeah, directors, you may be liable in this particular instance. And more specifically relating to the insurance, if you're not adhering to the duties that you have to the corporation, your insurance may not cover you. Your insurance covers you for good faith actions in trying to fulfill those 3 Ds, those 3 duties. But if you are just ignoring your duties and you're not making any good faith attempt to adhere to them, that insurance that you get may not cover you, which is not an argument against having it. It's just saying you need to meet the insurance company part way. So bylaws. So what do? Well, you should either follow them, or if you don't like the bylaws for some reason, like let's say you don't like the makeup of the board, you want to have a different kind of makeup to the board, just as an example, you can change your bylaws. You can change the rules that you have. So follow them, or change them to something that you like and want and are willing to follow, or do a combination of both of them. And then as you go down the road, you probably should have an annual or some kind of periodic review of your bylaws to say, hey, are we, number one, are we following them? And number 2, do we like this one? Or, hey, we just ran into a situation with some problems with membership and we need a mechanism to address those problems in the future, so why don't we update them or make some changes to it. So that was a couple comments that I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to field them for you if I can.
Brett, have you identified some of the bylaws that we should be looking at as far as changing?
Yeah, so in our July meeting, I provided everybody with this handout on opportunities or considerations for specific bylaw items. And in my initial conversation with John, I provided this over, and just some good examples are our bylaws prescribe what towns get how many nominations to the board. Their nominations are by no means set in stone. They need to be approved by a majority of the board of directors. There's 1 seat that's reserved for Winnebago Land and Water Commission. We do not have a seat that's filled by Winnebago Land and Water Commission. Town of Rippon's only supposed to have 2 seats. They have 3. Which, that would be something that I would look to change, because we're not doing that today. Other items are our bylaws require the towns nominate town residents. Well, I'd argue a number of people who've been on this board have been put or nominated to their directorship from towns that they are not a resident in. A former neighbor of mine, or a current neighbor of mine, former director of Rush Lake Watershed, I believe got on in our organization as a representative of the town of Ripon when he lived in town of Nepeuskun, owned no property in town of Ripon, but that's just who nominated him. Wasn't a resident of Ripon. Was he a good board member? I think probably, yeah. So it's a matter of adjusting the bylaws to have them reflect, the organization that we want to be down the road. And if that means creating more parity on the towns, and that's the interesting thing. I've talked to a number of you about the composition of the board, and Rushford has 2 seats, Town of Rippon's supposed to have 2, Nepeuskun and Utica are each supposed to have 3. Somebody was telling me, well, that's why our town's supposed to have this many, and they didn't know how many their town was supposed to have. So their memory of the original foundation that we built on was not reflected or borne out in the bylaws. So the way I look at them is they're a starting point for making a change that allows us to better protect ourselves. And I guess a good example is, one of our mutual funds at Homes invested in this publicly traded company, and they sent out this letter with their new updated bylaws, and it says, our articles of incorporation and bylaws have been amended. These documents are last amended in 2006. As part of good governance, the board periodically reviews the governing documents to assure that we have the most effective governance structure and that we describe the board's responsibilities and processes in a clear way. This is a publicly traded company sending me an updated set of bylaws in Ripon, Wisconsin, and I know one thing. There's nothing I can do about it. They impact my life in no way, but because I own this stock indirectly, these bylaws are applicable to me because I have a say in how the company's managed. So, like insurance, I think bylaws are a way that we can improve ourselves to better protect ourselves if the unthinkable happens in the future as we scale up. So to answer your question, yes, there are opportunities. I don't think tonight's the proper time to have a debate on them. It's very much like insurance, where we could all get in a room and arm wrestle for 2 hours, and 6 be on one side and 6 be on another, and we'd be like, okay, now what? So I think it's something we think about, and if the answer is I just recirculate what I sent out in July just for that initial stab on what the bylaws might look like and ways that we might look to change them, maybe that's where we go from here, and we address that in a different meeting, probably the same time as insurance, but not necessarily. I don't know.
Wouldn't that be a matter, just put it on the agenda for the next quarterly meeting? I mean, would that be timely enough?
I don't know if it is. I mean,
I think a couple of people should probably get together and talk about what we want to change, and then bring that to the, instead of talking about everyone with the whole group, because that might take a while.
And if you don't mind if I interrupt, one thing that would probably be, to my mind, a more urgent matter would be to, if board members' terms have expired, I would suggest that you address that, because you don't want to have somebody make, an argument, hey, board members' terms are expired. So you may want to put that on an agenda to address if you're reappointing people, so that you have board members who are board members. They're in an active term. That may be something you want to address sooner rather than later. Some of the other items, I don't know if there is an urgency on, unless you guys feel it in particular.
how do we address that with validity? If all of us were last voted onto the board greater than 3 years ago, which is the maximum term allowable by our current bylaws, then we're all operating on an out of term. We're all out of term, every one of us. So do we go back to the towns and say you need to renominate positions? And can we say, because you have 3 seats, whatever town, you're nominating someone for a 1-year term, someone for a 2-year term, someone for a 3-year term? Because, staggered terms are a good thing, and we contemplated that in the original bylaws. So how do you think through that one, John?
No, I think that makes sense. I think exactly what you said. The staggered terms are put in there because you don't have a whole bunch of institutional knowledge leaving at once. You have slower turnover, so you don't have suddenly a board that everybody's brand new, and everybody who knew what you did on that last project is gone now. So the staggered terms, I think, is a great idea. And that's something I think putting on, I'm just saying that you may want to put on your next agenda and say, hey, let's get our directors put together. And if that means going back to the town boards and saying, hey, we're gonna be renewing terms, give us some names, because your town boards typically meet monthly, so if you guys are meeting quarterly, they could get back to you easily with that.
In our township, that's how it's done.
Yeah, we always are renominated for the township as a representative every 3 years.
Good. So if the town's taking action,
That's our township, that's Utica.
yeah.
We haven't made any action out of that. We haven't, and that's what we need to do. We need to say, Town of Utica has renominated Tom Davis or Kevin Fritz, and same thing with Nepeuskun, and then we need to vote on it as a board.
Tom Rippon renews theirs as well. I remember my dad telling me that they re-voted us in or whatever. It must have been 2 years ago.
Drafted, but
Yeah. If the town nominates it, that's nice, but the bylaws, the town gets the nomination, but whether you actually make it on the board or not is up to the directors of Rush Lake Watershed. So if somebody that nobody liked was nominated, they wouldn't get on the board because they would be voted down. Or they could be voted down.
Yeah.
It's not an automatic you're in just because the town wants you to be.
Well, you have to have someone that's willing to do it to start with.
I mean, we could change the bylaws too. We can make it so there's more open seats for the public. Because honestly, I'm a great example. I moved to the area in 2008. I moved here because duck hunting was part of my history, and Rush Lake was something that I'd experienced with Brad Steinbach visiting my dad's friend hunting on the lake. And I wanted to get involved in the organization. And I only got here because Kenny Merck decided to retire or whatever. And for whatever reason, Nepeuskun nominated me. But, you know, honestly, it doesn't matter to me if Nepeuskun nominated me or whatever. Because you know what, if Ron's like, no, you know what, I'm the town chairman, I'm going to nominate whoever, you know, Rush Lake Watershed, it's not that important to me. I'm not going to spend that much time trying to figure out who should be it. Honestly, like, the towns having a say is important to me because the towns have a vested interest in the area being strong. But I think having more open seats is something that's even better because then, guess what? Someone sitting in the audience could be like, shoot, I want to be a part of this. I care. I came out on a Monday night for an hour and a half to listen to your grant update and then talk about bylaws and insurance. You know? I mean, Tom, like,
How large a board are you talking then? I mean, I'm curious on that too. Are we up to 28 people or is it just, you know, there again, bylaws, what do we set?
we have 12 in the bylaws. That's how many we have. So the number is set.
Okay.
With the who gets the appointment, we're following all but the Winnebago County Land and Water Commission.
Okay.
Fine. The terms were not fine.
Well, we did add one seat for a member at large.
Yeah. Change bylaws, right?
Right.
We did.
Back in 2010, you added a member, right? Right.
I mean, if there's an occasion that we find someone that the committee wants to be on the committee, we already did that with that move.
We're not a
Then
committee.
again, too,
We're an incorporated 501c3 that Uncle Sam
Okay, but I mean,
uses a legal
as members here, we did add another position, a member at large. I mean, that's not, we've already exercised that at one point. I don't know what, I mean, it's nice to have people that are involved and active, maybe more than some of us are. And, but you still need to have representation for the area, for the towns. That was obviously agreed on early when I was not here. And otherwise, that wouldn't have been established in that method. That each township had some representation.
Art.
what I was going to say is technically, you know, I'm town of Ripon, but actually I live in the city of Ripon. So, and, you know, so if the town of Ripon only supposed to have two guys, well, Gary and Seth, and I'm odd man out. You know, that's the bottom line.
Sounds like it's an issue that should be considered, but it's not going to be earth-shaking or you know, roll the committee out on the street.
Well,
It's been working pretty damn good for the last 18 years, just as it sits.
I think we should just get a couple people together and go through and figure out which bylaws we're not adhering to, and bring that up at the next quarterly meeting.
I would agree. It should be appropriate to go through and see what laws we're not adhering to, or so they can be either
We should at least
follow the
how
rules
big
or
of
change
a
the
pile,
rules,
how big
whichever.
of a pile we gotta deal with.
You know, I'll just say this is, years ago I talked to Rob Stone, who was originally a director on here, and he was just talking, I think, a lot of the things that were going on in town in Nepeuskun at the time, as far as, you know, maybe comprehensive land planning and all the rest of that, and he said, you know, it sure was a lot nicer when all it was the Horse Thieves Association. And I think that's the bottom line with some of this stuff, is, you know, we're going to a whole new level. We're trying to get grant money of God knows how much we're going to end up with, but, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars seems very possible. And before we used to be able to have Ellen do that all for us, and we just kind of said, hey, good girl, but, or good lady. And now it isn't that way anymore, so we probably need to go and get this stuff straightened out.
Is there any provision for term limits in our bylaws?
3-year maximum, but there's no limit on number of terms.
of terms.
So after your term is up, you can be re-nominated. And there's also a provision in the bylaws that says if we're doing something consistent with the bylaws and we're all generally in favor of it, has a temporary effect. It has the effect of a temporary change to the bylaws. So even though we're not following it perfectly, it's not like we're totally in the wrong, but there's housekeeping to do.
Did you distribute a copy of the bylaws back in July, Brett?
If it wasn't July, it would have been
Well, it was a
April.
while back.
Can we get a new distribution on that so everyone has a copy?
Sure.
And
I'll
we can each study it a bit. And
I'll circulate the bylaws and the commentary. As far as discussing and exacting a change, John, is that something, like when we did the change in 2010, you drafted up the resolution and whatnot, would it make sense to have a consultation after, or if we were here and we make a resolution like we did earlier tonight for this grant application that we're going to submit, that we can just go ahead and do it ourselves without having you come back?
Oh, without having to come back for sure. If you wanted me to look at something, I'd be happy to do that, but I don't think you need to have me here at a meeting. A lot of resolutions, if you kind of have your standard format, you can modify. So I guess I'd leave it up to you to decide, is there enough question or complexity to it that you want to have me look at it or not. I'm happy to come back, but most of the time I don't know if it's necessary to do so. So I guess I'd leave it up to you to decide, yeah, this may be complicated enough, let's give them a call. But some of the more simple stuff, I think you can just do on your own.
Okay. Okay, does anybody else have any questions or comments for John on the topic of bylaws? Otherwise, we'll go to the last item for next meeting. No? All right. Thank you so much, John.
Sure.
Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, John.
Have a good night.
John.
Okay, so last item. Next meeting's not as simple as it sounds, because 2019 we have a full slate ahead of us, just with grants and whatnot. So before going to scheduling the next meeting, I just want to recap some of those items, and let's just think backwards to what makes sense. Because you could argue less meetings is the right decision, or you could argue that more meetings is the right decision. So there's grant-specific items next year, such as having the grant subcommittee continue on some of these things. The grant-specific item of Lake Management Plan Steering Committee, which might include members from Ducks Unlimited, universities, the public, Rush Lake Watershed, and Stantec, to name a few. DNR also possibly, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the list goes on. Other grant items, holding an open house that's contemplated in the grant application. Having a field day is contemplated in the grant application also, where we can give people a tour and kind of hands-on sort of look at Rush Lake. And also presenting at a conference next year, which isn't anything that would require much involvement from the broader group, but maybe one or two or three. Other events for next year, a RLWRI fundraiser, Vines and Rush's fundraiser, like we had this last year. Potential outreach events could be having an info table at county fairs. The Kingston Mill Pond had a table at the Green Lake County Fair. You could say, hey, let's have a couple people walk in a parade. We could do decorate the Christmas tree and Dickens of a Christmas thing next year to help with outreach also. So those are all specific things we could be doing beyond general meetings. For general meetings themselves, there are two things that really stood out from our meetings in the last couple of months. In our conversation with NRDA about not receiving a grant at this time, they suggested, connecting more closely with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Horicon and setting up a field day where we'd go to Horicon and, get a firsthand look at some of the things we're doing down there. That's something that I think would be a more the merrier kind of thing for us directors and any interested public that would be, to the extent that we can orchestrate it. So that could be an entire meeting that we have next year. It's just a Horicon field day. Also, a special speaker for next year, Dr. Kyle Herman, who is our contact at UW Stevens Point. He said he'd be happy to come to our organization and speak about the initiatives that we might have in front of us or whatever is applicable at the time. With Stephen's point, presenting itself as a very robust partner that opens up a lot of different avenues to what we're looking to do grant-wise. I could see them being involved in many different degrees. So for me, I could see it makes sense to bring Dr. Herman down to talk to us as soon as we receive, or if we receive a lake management planning grant, because if Stephen's point is doing the soil sampling and we're getting the project kicked off, then maybe we want to talk to this guy after the grant award is handed out, which, Melissa, your thought would be that's like a mid-February kind of thing?
Yeah, they'll make notifications mid-February, but then, you won't have to sign the paperwork for several weeks, if not a month afterwards. So it's not really official until you sign the grant paperwork.
Yeah. So for that example, you could say, hey, it'd be great to have this professor come and talk to us after the grant award, but not too late because the project's starting really quick. So we could find ourselves saying we want to have a meeting in late February or March sometime. But do we want to say, well, then what do we do about a January meeting, which is what we typically do? So I guess that's where I open it up to that. We talk about, we can kick around insurance and bylaws stuff some more. Do we just get that stuff out of the way in in a January meeting, and then we have a more hands-on management style meeting in March, like a January and then a March instead of a January and then an April? I guess I don't know. I'll just open it up to conversation because we could do anything we want.
Well, we have it that we have 4 meetings a year on a quarterly basis, but if we're needing to do more meetings, we need the flexibility to be able to pull that off. Because, if stuff comes up, you've got to deal with it. My opinion.
Anybody else?
Makes sense when you put it there, because you don't know until it actually comes. So.
Right, and obviously if there's a deadline for grant signature or whatever, you're going to have meetings to discuss that.
Right.
And that's not always going to fit in your quarterly meetings, so, but I don't think we should abandon the quarterly format, just add extra special meetings.
Right.
I don't see any issue with that. And like tonight, not everyone can attend at every meeting, so it's always going to be that way.
So that sounds fine to me. I don't want our quarterly meetings to be 3-hour marathons, and I don't want to say we've got a monthly meeting every month, and that's overkill too. So I'm just trying to find the sweet spot. So based on Tom and Art, your feedback, we shoot for a January one, and then maybe we do a special one in late February or March to
accordingly with the information we get. The grants were granted, that kind of thing.
Well, because if I say, we got things ready to go, it'll be the second week of February. Well, maybe instead of being the last of January, you can have it in February.
Yeah.
That'd be a problem. Just take it as it comes.
But we don't need to try to cram everything into a few meetings. Like you said, those 3-hour marathons, they kind of get to be, we'd rather have more shorter meetings.
Yeah, I'd rather show it more often than sit here for 3 hours, 4 hours.
Okay.
It really does. If we fell too many topics into one night, it kind of loses a lot.
Right.
Yep.
As opposed to concentrating on what we need to.
Okay. Well then, does anyone want to make a motion for our next meeting date? I don't know what the third Thursday in January is, if we wanted to stick to the standard.
I'd like to make a motion for the 17th of January, Thursday the 17th.
Thursday, January 17th.
Second.
Is
I will probably be gone by that time. We're supposed to head down south if all the planets align properly. But
you want to do it earlier in the month?
We're going to leave by about the 10th, so I don't know if anybody wants to do that.
Well, what's 2 weeks?
You don't need me here for every meeting either.
Well, it depends what the subject matter of January is. If we just say January, we're just gonna deal with this housekeeping stuff on insurance and bylaws, that's when our opinions matter because there's no firm answer. It's all touch and feel. It's whatever feels right, so.
Let me see what.
In the town hall here, Ron, the calendar was free on the Nepeuskun website, but the standard monthly meeting is what day?
The third Monday.
Third Monday.
The Nepeuskun Anti-Horses annual banquet is on the third Thursday, but that starts at noon and it's all over by 3:30. So you're going to have a 7 p.m. meeting. That's not a problem. If in fact you stay with the 17th.
Well, I could do it. I'd be here for the first week, and I think we were talking about leaving around the 10th or so. So, but it's up to you guys.
Well, we can do it the 3rd. That'd be the first Thursday of the month.
What's that day, Seth?
The 3rd.
The 3rd, January 3rd.
Yeah, January 3rd is the first Thursday of January.
Anybody want to second that?
I'll second.
All right. Motion is made and seconded for our next meeting to be on Thursday, January 3rd, 7 o'clock at Nepeuskun Town Hall. Any other discussion on the next meeting time? Okay. All in favor of Thursday, January 3rd, 7 p.m. here? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We'll plan on that with a limited scope for bylaws and insurance. And I'll be circulating materials on that, and we'll go from there. Thank you, everyone.
And I move to adjourn.
All right. Motion made to adjourn.
I'll second.
And seconded. And we're adjourned. Thank you.